In 2010, Democrats lost 6 Senate seats and 63 seats in the House of Representatives, the single largest loss for either party since before World War II. And it was because Nancy Pelosi said, "We're here to get a job done, not keep a job." And Barack Obama entered office saying that he was going to fundamentally transform America, and that he did. At the start of the century, only about 3 in 10 Americans were on some form of federally sponsored health insurance. Today, post-ACA's Medicaid expansion, the majority of Americans are on socialized health care. Obama did better than any actual proponent of Medicare for All ever could dream of. Now Republicans have a once-in-a-generation chance to roll this back and roll back one of the fastest growing portions of the federal government. We can just say, getting rid of or imposing work requirements for able-bodied Medicaid recipients, about 20 million of them, that would cut $140 billion in 10 years. Taking non-citizens off of entitlements, that's $1 trillion you can generate. Banning the Medicaid provider gimmick tax would save $720 billion over 10 years. Now is the time. Political capital is meant for something. So will Republicans take this moment of passing the one big beautiful bill to do it? Because we know, Christian, as that score came out, we have about at least $5 trillion they have to pay for.
Yeah, I think the big top line number is giving some of these fiscal hawks obviously major concerns. But to your point, Republicans hold both chambers, although they are slim majorities. Donald Trump has been talking about for months, this needs to happen and it needs to happen now. So, I mean, ultimately, what's the holdup? Are we just going to get 2014 Republican efforts to repeal ACA that fail, or are Republicans truly worse at corralling their caucus and being effective governors than the Democrats are?
Part of the reason why the focus has been on Medicaid is because Donald Trump explicitly has ran twice in a row saying, I protect entitlements, I protect your Social Security and your Medicare. So we're just looking at Medicaid, and we're looking only at, they're not taking the Tiana Doe Scrooge McDuck hatchet that I would. Something like making sure that, so when Medicaid was originally passed by LBJ, it was meant for the severely disabled, extremely poor children, pregnant mothers to make sure you don't have mother dies and child winds up in an orphanage. And it only got expanded to include able-bodied adults with Obamacare. And what he did was he said, we will cover 100% of the costs of these able-bodied adults compared to disabled blind child who only gets about a 50% match in some states. So, for instance, one of the propositions would say, just make it so that way the federal government spends at least as much as it does on the nation's most vulnerable population as it does for these able-bodied adults who are on the Medicaid Obamacare expansion. That would reduce the deficit by $710 over the decade. So none of these are very radical propositions. The Medicare provider tax gimmick is just another way of enriching the insurance companies. So it doesn't make much sense why Republicans are running away from this unless you just literally view your entire political identity as Democrats bad and we don't like woke, and what are we voting you into a majority for? Don't get me wrong, I love tax cuts. The bigger this thing gets and the less control there is behind it, it seems like Republicans are just getting scared of actually having to do it. Well, and where is Nancy Pelosi circa 2012 for Republicans? Where you say, yeah, you know what, for these SALT terrorists that want to increase the state and local tax deduction cap to, they won't tell us the number, but where does Johnson say, we voted you to do a job, not to keep a job?
Yeah. That's interesting. I think, to your point about Mike Johnson and Nancy Pelosi, they are very different speakers in terms of how they can control their caucus. I'm actually surprised that Johnson has made it in this position this far, given how rocky it was in the beginning. But I want to pick up on that line you just mentioned, the Republicans versus Democrats thing, because Donald Trump on Monday, he announced this new drug pricing proposal. It's very aggressive. I actually really like it, and it's something Democrats have been talking about for the better part of the last 20 to 30 years in terms of directly lowering costs for American consumers. But is part of the problem just that the goalposts keep moving? Should Donald Trump just say, hey, I know I have all these ideas, but we have to pass something? Yeah. Ultimately, that's got to come from either the president or the speaker, right? Otherwise, the bill is just going to keep evolving and mutating until it's at a point where it truly is impassable. No?
And you have Jason Smith leading Ways and Means, who's probably like the closest thing we have to like the real bean counter figuring all this out.
Yeah.
But you don't have anyone you don't have a Kevin Brady or a Paul Ryan this time around that has a very cogent vision for what the reform was, right? Like, we all enjoyed the tax cuts, but the real benefit of the TCJA was making it simpler for 9 out of 10 Americans now just take that increased standard deduction, and then those of whom have children also the added child tax credit, to make it really easy, right? Like, a lot of people that used to have to hire accountants or waste a lot of time on TurboTax, they can just use the e-file on the federal government's website. There is no one with that vision. It is basically take a series of campaign slogans Trump used to win Nevada and put it all together and try and make the score equal 0 for reconciliation. Like, it's the president's bill, right? Trump got all the credit for Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and that was a good bill, and he correctly got credit for it. So he should be wanting to preserve that, right? I once again, the stakes are heading, if you do not get this bill passed, it's you head into a midterm election year of 2026 with the majority of Americans receiving a tax hike with an average tax hike of $2,000 per American. And that's not even to mention the added complexity of a bunch of people who got used to just going onto e-file saying, standard deduction, I have 2 kids, done, versus having to go through and itemize every single cost.